By the late 1920s, the global film industry was in motion. Hollywood had consolidated power, capital, and distribution on a scale unmatched by any other national cinema. Directors, designers, cinematographers, and performers crossed the Atlantic in growing numbers, drawn by studio contracts and access to resources unavailable elsewhere. That movement has shaped how this period is often remembered. At the same time, another story was unfolding. As Hollywood tightened its grip, some artists were leaving, not because work had disappeared, but because opportunity had narrowed. For them, Europe offered something Hollywood did not, the chance to exist on screen without being reduced to a single function. One of the most visible figures in that counter-movement was Anna May Wong. Welcome to the Cinematic Century Chronicle, and this is Pavement Butterfly, a film that mirrors Wong's career at the moment she stepped outside Hollywood's limits. This video contains spoilers. If you haven't seen the film, I recommend pausing here, watching it, and returning when you're ready. I also apologize for any mispronunciations. Thank you for understanding. The film is often listed under its English title, Pavement Butterfly. In German, it's Großstadt Schmetterling, literally Big City Butterfly. It also circulated under working titles like Die Fremde, The Foreigner. Those titles point in the same direction. They describe someone who moves through a modern city as both spectacle and outsider, admired at a distance, judged up close, and pushed back to the margins the moment she asks for something real. By the late silent era, Anna May Wong was already famous. She was also boxed in by the roles Hollywood was willing to offer an American-born Chinese actress. Even when she delivered controlled, expressive performances, the structure surrounding her remained unchanged. Admiration was permitted, but intimacy was not. Agency was rarely part of the design. These limits were reinforced by censorship pressures the studios had already learned to anticipate. By the late 1920s, Hollywood avoided stories that suggested interracial romance because they reliably triggered objections from church-led morality groups, civic decency organizations, and local censorship boards. Films that crossed those lines risked bans, protests, and lost bookings across large parts of the country. An American-born Chinese actress placed opposite a white romantic lead was treated as a financial risk long before a camera ever rolled. Studios responded by narrowing the roles instead of confronting the system. Wong could be admired, feared, or sacrificed within the story, but intimacy was treated as off-limits. Leading roles disappeared. White actors continued to play Asian characters in yellowface. The boundaries were firmly established, and there was no indication they would shift. So she left. In 1928, Wong traveled to Europe and signed a multi-picture contract with director Richard Eichberg, a filmmaker known for building stylish, star-driven films designed for international audiences. His work centered on glamour, movement, and modern urban life, treating performers as the core attraction. Wong's decision fit a broader moment in the industry. While Hollywood consolidated power and standardized production, artists continued to move across borders in search of creative space. Europe absorbed Hollywood style, jazz culture, and modern fashion. At the same time, it offered certain performers room to breathe where American studios imposed limits. That tension sits at the center of Pavement Butterfly. The film works as a melodrama and as a showcase built around Wong's presence. It also carries the shape of her professional reality. Pavement Butterfly was a German-British co-production made by Eichberg's company in Berlin in collaboration with British International Pictures in London. Co-productions let studios share costs, share distribution, and build films that could travel. They also pulled the creative process into a tug-of-war between national tastes, censorship expectations, and market logic. For European producers, Wong represented something specific. She carried international recognition without being tied to a single national identity. She embodied modernity, mobility, and cosmopolitan appeal, casting her open doors to global markets while sidestepping Hollywood's racial hierarchies. For Wong, European offered a different condition of work. She could appear as both contemporary and cosmopolitan. The camera can frame her in modern space, modern fashion, modern movement. It lets her feel current in a way Hollywood often avoided, where Chinese characters were treated like they lived outside time. From the opening stretch, the film practically tells on itself. Ma is introduced preparing for her performance while tending to a caged bird. Before the plot fully tightens its grip, the film shows how she is seen. She is presented as an attraction. She performs in exotic costuming. She uses fans. The crowd reads her as spectacle before it reads her as a person. Even the energy of the scene carries a familiar pressure. Ma is visible, desired, and controlled by the terms of that visibility. That opening can be read as a miniature version of Wong's position in the industry. The cage is never only literal, the audience's gaze becomes its own enclosure. Ma can draw attention, but attention does not equal safety. It does not equal belonging. Then the film pivots. A man named Coco tries to force himself on Ma, and another performer from the troupe steps in to stop him. Not long after, a stunt is engineered to fail. The same performer is sent into it and dies. Responsibility moves quickly toward Ma. Coco, denied what he wanted and eager to redirect suspicion, becomes the engine of the accusation, and the crowd closes ranks with alarming speed. Ma runs because the story has already been written for her if she stays. Flight opens a new space. She finds temporary refuge among artists, figures associated with creativity, openness, and modern life. The film shifts with her, away from spectacle and toward intimacy. She models for the painter Fedja Kuzmin. For a moment, the world seems to slow, as if attention might turn into understanding. That hope collapses just as quickly. When money goes missing, suspicion fills the gap. Trust gives way without resistance. Kuzmin expels her as easily as the crowd turned on her earlier. Art can admire her. Art can also reduce her to an image. It can offer shelter without protection, intimacy without security. That arc tracks uncomfortably well with Wong's larger career story. She was celebrated as an image across cultures. She was rarely given full narrative ownership of her own life on screen. The film suggests that escape is possible, but stability is not. Artistic spaces offer momentary shelter, not permanence. Like Ma, Wong could move between worlds, but belonging always remained conditional. One of the most striking things about watching Pavement Butterfly now is how modern Wong's screen presence feels compared to the louder silent era style surrounding her. Her performance is grounded. Her choices are small and precise. She doesn't rely on big theatrical signals to tell the viewer what to feel. She lets thought appear on her face, then disappear, then return with a new decision. When the plot turns against her, she doesn't perform panic for the camera. She plays the pressure of being read wrong and having no clean path to prove the truth. That restraint is part of why the film can carry emotional weight, even when the story leans into melodrama. Wong treats Ma as a person trapped in a system. This is also where the film's metaphor becomes harder to ignore. Wong had spent years in Hollywood playing characters written from the outside. Here, even within a story that still carries the era's racial framing, she pushes toward interiority. She plays the experience of being watched and misunderstood as something lived. The film's visual style plays a quiet but important role in how it holds together. Streets, interiors, and movement through the city are observed without exaggeration, giving the film a physical sense of place. One of my favorite moments comes when the camera follows Ma up a staircase. It stands out precisely because the film is otherwise restrained in its camera placement and movement. The ascent is simple, but the way it's filmed gives the space its own tension and rhythm. Camera movements and duration turn a routine passage into something charged. That balance defines the film's visual approach. The camera stays rooted in the world while allowing select moments of motion to carry emotional weight. When the film reaches its final stretch, Ma is carried into a different social world, one defined by wealth, gambling, and display. The spaces are elegant, carefully lit, and emotionally distant. The setting changes its surface, but not its logic. What matters is that Ma does not drift there passively. She confronts the danger that drove her into motion. She fights back against Coco. She exposes his role in the crime and recovers the money he stole. The accusations that followed her are proven false, not through mercy, but through her own action. That clarity changes nothing about her position. Kuzmin's faith is restored too late. The systems that turned on her remain intact. The film resolves the mystery, but it refuses to reward her with belonging. That refusal is the film's quiet brutality. Ma is granted truth and agency, then denied a place to stand. The final line lands because it does not bargain or explain. It states a condition that has already been proven. I don't belong to you. Even if the surrounding plot fades, that sentence endures because it feels inseparable from Wong's larger history. Admired across borders, denied permanence, and still insisting on herself at the moment of departure. What makes Pavement Butterfly especially revealing is that contemporary reviewers could see the problem even as they participated in the culture that produced it. Some German critics and commentators pointed directly at the film's racial and sexual hypocrisy, noting how the story withholds from its Asian heroine the kind of romantic resolution routinely granted to white female leads. That tension was often linked to the film's international production context. Reviewers recognized that its moral caution, especially around intimacy, reflected commercial limits shaped by foreign markets and conservative audience expectations. The film's restraint was not read as accidental, it was understood as imposed. That doesn't resolve the film's contradictions. It frames them. It reminds us that these pressures were visible at the time. The cage could be identified even as the industry continued to reinforce it. For Anna May Wong, Pavement Butterfly marked a turning point, but not a resolution. Her European period brought visibility, range, and leading roles that Hollywood had refused her. She worked across Germany, Britain, and France, becoming an international star at a moment when American studios still treated her as a limitation rather than an asset. That freedom came with its own constraints. Even abroad, Wong remained framed through exoticism, and interracial romance continued to be hedged or withdrawn at the point of conclusion. When sound cinema arrived, language barriers and studio politics narrowed her European options. By the early 1930s, she returned to Hollywood, where she encountered the same ceiling she had tried to escape. Her later career unfolded unevenly. She worked steadily in film, radio, and television, becoming one of the first Asian American performers to lead a U.S. television series. Yet the roles she had been denied in the silent era were never fully restored to her. The distance between her talent and the industry's imagination remained. For director Richard Eichberg, Pavement Butterfly belonged to a productive period built on international co-productions, star vehicles, and modern urban melodrama. He continued working into the early sound era, but his style was closely tied to silent era spectacle and mobility. As the industry shifted toward dialogue-driven storytelling and national markets tightened, his prominence faded. What remains is the record they made together. Pavement Butterfly survives as evidence of a brief opening, a moment when international cinema allowed Anna May Wong to stand at the center of a story, even as the limits around her remained firmly in place. Nearly a century after its release, Pavement Butterfly remains a revealing document of a career shaped by contradiction. It shows Anna May Wong moving through a modern city as a star who is constantly visible and never fully allowed to settle. Admiration follows her everywhere. Belonging does not. The film also captures a moment when cinema itself was in motion. International co-productions were expanding what films could look like and where they could be made, while carrying the era's racial limits with them. Wong appears here in transition, between industries, between expectations, between versions of herself that were permitted and those that were not. That tension has never fully disappeared. Nearly a century later, when Damien Chazelle made Babylon, one of its characters was shaped in part by the image and history of Anna May Wong.
You're going to do great things in Europe. You were always one of the good ones.
Thank you.
The reference matters because Wong's story continues to surface whenever filmmakers try to reckon honestly with early Hollywood, its glamour, its ambition, and the exclusions built into its foundations. Pavement Butterfly ends by refusing ownership. Ma walks away with the clearest sentence the film can offer. It lands not as a plea or a compromise, but as a boundary drawn after experience. I don't belong to you. Next time on Cinematic Century Chronicle, we'll remain in 1929 and examine Man with a Movie Camera, a radical experiment that treats everyday life itself as cinema. Subscribe and join me as we continue to chronicle 100 years of film, one story at a time. Until next time, have a great rest of your day.